Hey guys, we're just gonna kind of go over some of the tools that we use for moisture inspections. The first one of the most important ones, is our moisture meter here. What this does is basically you can put it up to a surface on the back side here, and it'll tell you if there's any excessive moisture in the drywall or in the baseboards or flooring, things like that. There's another function here. It's got kind of some spikes up here. You can stick it into the carpet, through the pad, into that subfloor, kind of see what the subfloor is reading, if there's any moisture in there. Basically how this works is it sends out electric pulse on one side, and when there's moisture in any materials, what is it?
Electromagnetic, basically. So what it gets is it's a non-invasive, so it'll go down to about 3/4 of an inch or 20 millimeters is what it'll read on any depth, whether it be lath and plaster, drywall, hardwood, subfloor, etc. It'll pick up moisture between a 3/4 and 20 millimeters.
Right. So that's kind of this. We got a couple of accessories we can attach to this. The first one here is what we call a hammer probe. What you can do is you hook this in the side. You can hammer through hardwood floors, hammer through baseboards and drywall to read the framing behind the wall, to make sure that you're getting to the center of the sill plate on the bottom to see what the moisture is reading in there. The other one we have here is a baseboard reader. So what this does is it slides down between the baseboard and the drywall to see if you have any moisture hanging out behind those without pulling them off. So if you'll follow me over here, I just kind of find a spot where it'll slide right down. You hook it up here. If there's any moisture, it'll tell you how much moisture you have back there, so we can kind of check without tearing things apart to start with. And that's pretty much how the moisture meter works and what it's used for. The other one we have here, this is a hygrometer. What this does is take the atmospheric readings, so your environment. Obviously, we try to make our own drying containment area. So what that does is it'll read the temperature and the RH in the room to make sure that our dehumidifiers and things like that are working properly. We're getting the conditions for perfect dry out. So other than that, I'll let you take it on that.
So the last thing that we have too is a FLIR. It's a thermal image camera, basically. They come in various sizes. This one here is a pocket one. Basically, you can stick it right here in your pocket. Easiest thing. The other ones that we have are a little bit bigger, handheld. So basically, what we have with the thermal imager is I'll turn it on here, and I'll sort of move on over to where we can get a little close up, and we'll point it right here at this door, because what's going to happen is we're going to see the discoloration of what's cold and what's hot. So if you can see here, we're looking right directly at the door, and you can see the cold spot is basically that whole door. So that's basically telling us that there's a cold spot there, or potentially moisture when we're checking on actual residential or commercial buildings. That's indicating that there could possibly be some moisture. Now, some of the time when we're using the infrared, there could be ducting, basically out of the registers or anything like that. Sometimes they're registering out cold or anything like that. So what really comes in handy is the moisture meter. This is going to be our main tool that we're going to be using to make sure that there's actually moisture in that area. So a quick highlight, we're basically have water in our body, and so what we're going to do is we're going to get that sound, which basically is letting us know that there's moisture somewhere in that building material. So the thermal camera is a nice basic tool, basically, because what's going to do is it's going to let us know exactly where we're looking at for moisture, and then we're going to come behind with that moisture meter to ensure that we're not, knowing that it's actually wet or if it's not, because sometimes we can get those false readings with the thermal imaging camera, since there's a lot of things that are reading cold, especially ducting, outside by the windows, stuff like that, etc., that are bringing in that cold air. So those are sort of the tools that we use on the daily basis of when we're going to water loss on residential commercial buildings. These are the tools that we're going to be using right away when we get there. We're going to do our thorough moisture inspection. We're going to go and we're going to see exactly where the affected area is at with all these tools, and make sure that we're not missing anything that could be wet that gets missed on saying, well, it's only wet in this one bedroom, but we're going to take it one step further, and we're going to go and inspect the adjoining rooms to make sure that we didn't miss any water that went into those areas as well. I think that's
that's a basic rundown on kind of the tools that we use when we show up for a water loss.
Alright guys, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to do basically a walkthrough of how we're going into residential or commercial buildings, on how we're using these tools specifically, and the way that we need to inspect our moisture throughout the affected areas that we're finding on site. So first, normally what we'll do is we're going to get our thermal imager out, and we're going to go ahead and just going to go right up here to this wall. Basically what's going to happen is we have a cabinet behind this joining wall. Water supply line broke, had a little bit of water affect carpet, some baseboard, drywall. So basically for this little scenario, that we're just going to pull out our thermal camera. Right now we're just going to say right now that right in this corner we're getting some moisture above the baseboard, and so what Matt's going to do is he's going to take that moisture meter and just make sure that we're actually getting moisture readings from our actual moisture meter. And right now it looks like we can't really read too much through it because of how we got the baseboard. So what we'll do now is, with our other tools that we have, is we have that baseboard moisture meter that we can go ahead and hook up to the moisture meter. And then slide that right behind there. This is a great way for us having, not having to remove any of the baseboards at the time. We can go ahead and slide this thing right behind, check it. If we're getting moisture readings, then we know we need to pop off that baseboard, and we know that that drywall is wet behind. So the other thing that we can use too is we can use the hammer probe if we want, and we can find an inconspicuous spot sort of on the baseboard, and we can go ahead and hammer probe basically through the baseboard, and it'll go through to the drywall, so that way we can see if we have any moisture that way as well. So we have multiple ways that we can go about, checking if there's moisture behind the baseboards without having to remove it at first. So that way we're not taking anything out that we really don't need to at that time. So basically that's our walkthrough that we would do when we first get on site, as we're going through with thermal imager, the moisture meter, and we're checking all our surroundings, making sure that we're not missing anything that might have got wet in other areas that could be adjoining that backside of the wall. So that's typically how we'll start off going on our moisture inspection.
Okay, so after we've kind of used everything to inspect, see what's wet, what's not wet, we do use a software. It's called Mika. We do use that to record our drying conditions, our moisture points in the materials that are wet. So if we have wet carpet here, we'll go ahead and put a moisture point in there that'll say, it's reading 100% on day one. We come back every day, we do our moisture inspection with our moisture meter. We'll put it on there. It'll give us a reading of kind of how much moisture is in that material. Second day should be dropping down quite a bit, especially in your commercial carpeting. It dries pretty quick. Say we have some in the drywall here, so we'll put a point for the drywall. We'll put a point for the framing behind the drywall. Anything that's wet, we'll put a moisture point in there. Every day we get there to do our monitors, we'll pull out the computer, our moisture meters, we'll check all the materials, we'll put in the numbers of what it's reading. Say it was 100% yesterday, I'm here day 2, the carpet's drying really well, so we're down around 40, 41, so I'll put that in there. And then every day it'll kind of drop down. If we're drying correctly and everything's working properly, then we'll obviously be able to see how that moisture is coming out of those materials, and how well it's drying, how fast it's drying. If it's not drying, then we can kind of change up some methods, change up a different way to do things, and then we'll go ahead and get it drying a little bit faster if we need some heat, things like that. It just kind of helps us know what's going on, how it works, and how well we're drying with everything. So we will use that mapping software, Mika. It does have a sketch, so we can draw kind of water lines to show where the moisture is in the program itself, to put our moisture points on there. And then like I said, daily drying records will come out on the back end on the summary page, and it'll have kind of a graph to show how much you're dropping each day and how everything's looking. Hope that was some information for you guys you can use, and that's about all we got.
For moisture meters.